To our viewers and listeners, as well as our friends in the media who are here with us today, good afternoon, and welcome to this another edition of the Roundtable with the Honorable Dr. Prime Minister Terrance Drew. My name is Javan Liebert, standing in for your usual moderator, Mrs. Adelcia Connor-Falance, Press Secretary within the Prime Minister's office. Now, today's gathering promises to be insightful and informative as we delve into the latest updates and discuss pertinent issues facing our nation. The usual format will apply. The Prime Minister will first begin with an opening statement, and then we open the floor to media to engage in discussion. With us today are representatives from local media agencies, from ZIZ, Devon Cornelius, from SKNIS, Ian Richards, from SKN Newsline, Glenn Batt, WinFM, Kevin Brown, and SKN Source, Ebony Brandon. As we move into what is expected to be a productive exchange, I now hand over to the Prime Minister for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I want to take this opportunity to really invite and to thank all of our citizens and residents who are tuning in to say thank you. You could have been doing something else with your time. I want to thank you for joining me as we gather to reflect and discuss the recent strides and significant developments within our beloved Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. It brings me great pride and satisfaction to share with you the latest endeavors and accomplishments of your government, showcasing our unwavering commitment to progress, prosperity, and well-being of all our citizens and residents. As you are well aware, I journeyed abroad on your behalf, engaging in a series of high-level meetings with investors, diplomats, and world leaders, discussing initiatives and opportunities that would lend to the overall development and well-being of our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And as such, I am happy to report that our efforts to secure a number of initiatives would have borne fruit. And let me say, I usually keep these meetings every time I make a trip overseas. It is my belief that it is important that I inform you, the people, who are responsible for me being here, on the outcomes of these trips. We, during that time on this trip, made significant strides. One of the things that we were able to achieve was an MOU that would have been signed between a Saudi development investor group, K&K, and Siemens. Siemens, as you know, has a good reputation for technological advancement. And as such, it's a significant player in the renewable space. K&K is a significant investor organization in the UAE. And they came together to sign an MOU, which would redound to the benefit of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, an MOU to start the official study to develop geothermal as a source of energy in Nevis. I want to inform the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and especially Nevis, that the Premier of Nevis and the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Mark Grantley, has been engaged on these engagements that I was involved in the UAE. As a matter of fact, I sent him a copy of the MOU that was signed between Siemens and the KK Group. And also, I would have had discussions with him earlier in the month where he gave his ardent support that as a federation, we achieve the development of the geothermal energy potential. During that trip, I also met with private investors. I met with those who are interested in exploring financial opportunities here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I also met those who want to do development here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I met with the owner of SeaWorld in UAE, who has expressed interest in coming to St. Kitts and Nevis and exploring the possibility of investing. I also had the opportunity to know a number of activities surrounding our CBI. And as you know, we would have made changes to our CBI to save our CBI. And I want to continue to impress to our people that we had to make necessary changes. Had we not made those changes, we could have lost our visa-free access to a number of areas. And I'm happy that we were able to do those changes. Our changes are now received with enthusiasm and thanks, as many in that area think that our changes would bring stability and strength to the program. And I, of course, held a luncheon where I invited a number of persons in the industry, and we were able to engage. We had a very, very good turnout. That was just one CBI event. I also had the opportunity to have an event dealing with a specific development to take place here in St. Kitts and Nevis, that is the Performing Arts Center, where I interacted with about 60 investors who are interested in that particular development. And then further to that, I participated in a fireside chat in the Investment Migration Forum, where I presented St. Kitts and Nevis's position and its program. And that also was well received. All of this on the trip in the UAE. On my return from the UAE, I stopped in Florida and I participated in a very high-level discussion called the Concordia Americas Summit. I participated in the Strategic Dialogue on Regional Unity. I was joined on the panel by distinguished persons from Colombia, the OAS, Commander of the U.S. Southern Command, and others, where we discuss how can the area of Latin America and the Caribbean states continue to work together for advancement and, of course, protecting our democracies. That, of course, resulted in tangible relationships for you, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. So at the end of the day, I will say that this trip was extremely successful, especially on the CBI end, the geothermal end, and making sure that internationally, St. Kitts and Nevis maintains a good reputation and is respected around the world. And I want to thank all those who were involved with respect to that. And so I'm very, very happy with the outcome of those meetings. I want to also say from the end what we are doing here in St. Kitts and Nevis with respect to water. As you know, presently, we are developing a significant resource in the Keon area. And in the Keon area, I was able to visit, but this morning, the minister with responsibility for water visited the area, and I saw that he took a drink of the water. Testing has shown that the water is pure, and we thank God for that. We are in the final stages of testing, and within the next, not too far in the future, that source will be connected so that the people of Keon and the surrounding environments can enjoy a more steady supply of water. And I want to reiterate very strongly here that Bede, who is responsible for this development, was brought into St. Kitts and Nevis by the previous Labour administration. On the change of government in 2015, as outlined by the Honorable Mark Grantley, who was a member of cabinet of the last administration, said in a radio broadcast that Bede was stopped because the minister then did not want them to continue their work. Hence, the people of Keon suffered when they could have been helped. They were failed. But on taking office, we immediately engaged BEAD, and today, in less than 2 years in being in office, we are at the cusp of delivering more water for the people, the good people of Keon and surrounding environs. And so I want to thank all those who are involved, including the minister and the ministry, in ensuring that that resource is developed. I want to also say and make it clear, and you all would have seen that there was a blockout at JNF Hospital. That was a test. I want to say it clearly. NEMA has said it. The hospital has said it. SCELEC has said it. And if you ask the military, they were also involved with the police. As we know, the hurricane season is upon us, and we have to make sure that we are ready. And this type of disaster testing is not unusual, but we are making sure that we test as much as possible so that we are ready for whatever may come our way. And I know there's those in the social media seeking to spread all sort of falsehood with respect to the testing. But I want to reiterate, that was a controlled test to see how ready we are to deal with the disasters. Immediately following, a number of press releases were done coming from SCELEC, the Ministry of Health and so forth, because it was coordinated. In these testing, you try not to inform the public or the persons who work in the institution. You want them to deal with this as if a disaster had hit. And so the sound you heard, boom, boom, that was actually orchestrated. And actually the smoke you see, all of that was simulation so that we could have gotten it as close as possible to what is real. And immediately after, the electricity was put back on. You had to make sure that no patient was at risk, meaning nobody was in ICU on any machine, nobody was in theater, everybody was stable. But in a real disaster, disaster does not choose whether people are hooked up to machines or not hooked up to machines. It happens, but it, of course, would give us data as to how ready we are. And I want to thank all those who are involved for that critical testing. And I'm asking the media here to try, please help us in dispelling those falsehoods. And you will see more testing taking place as we get closer and closer to the hurricane season. I also want to touch on another critical matter, the critical matter of national security, which I'm sure I will get many questions about. But immediately on return, yesterday, as I came off of the flight from Florida, I had a meeting with the Commissioner of Police and the Commander of our Defense Force, accompanied by the AG, of course, and the PS in my office who is acting at the Ministry of National Security. And there I got an update as to what is the strategy in dealing with the recent upsurge in crime. Let me say clearly that the police and the security apparatus would have put in place a strategy, and we saw a decrease in overall crime in the first quarter. Gun violence went down. Other crime in general all went down. So it means, therefore, that the strategy for the first quarter yielded results. However, there was a sudden upsurge, and I was away when this took place. And even when I was away, I stayed in touch with cabinet members. I also was in touch with the commissioner as to the strategy to deal with this. And that continued immediately as I returned. And then today, the whole of cabinet, I call her the whole of cabinet together in person with the high command of the police force, including the commander of the defense force, for further updates as to what is the strategy going forward. And I'm pleased to say that they presented their strategy is in place, and they are doing what they have to do They have been asked to come back to Cabinet within the next 2 weeks to give the Cabinet an update. Let me say that this government and me personally, we will work as hard as possible because every life is precious. Every life is precious. And we have to work to preserve every life. And so I want to encourage our young people, especially our young men, to not get involved in this type of criminal activities that lead to death and destruction and hospitalization and trauma, to choose positive ways and positive paths, to take advantage of the many opportunities here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I want you to know that your life matters. Your life matters to me, it matters to us. Your life is precious. Guard it, protect it. And we want you, of course, to live a fruitful life here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so our approach is multi-pronged. And very soon, as we have been putting together the strategy of dealing with violence from a public health perspective, which is an all-of-society approach to crime and violence, we will officially launch. I think it might be the first one in the Caribbean that will be launched in such a comprehensive way. Tomorrow, I travel to CAFA. I travel to participate in a CAFA meeting that deals with crime from a public health perspective. I also discuss other ways because I want our citizens to know that we are dealing with this issue, but that we are making sure that our country remains strong and stable. And so I've also engaged our regional partners. As you know, I'm the chairman for the RSS. They have specialists there as well who would also do an assessment which can help to give us information as well as evaluation going forward. So all hands are on deck with respect to that and our all-of-society structured approach, because everybody knows that it will take all of us to work overtime to resolve matters like these as in any other country or society. But it has to be structured, organized, with clear and defined plan of actions or action and outcomes. That is what we are working on even as we speak. But we would have made significant investments in the national security apparatus thus far, and we'll continue to make necessary investments. First and foremost, to protect our precious lives, no matter who you are. Your life is precious. To make sure that our country continue to be a vibrant democracy where peace abounds. And so I think I want to wrap up my opening statement here and to give the press the opportunity to engage me on a number of critical matters, those that I would have mentioned or any other matter that they want to engage me in. And so I open it up to you, the press.
Good day, Glenn Bart, SKN News 9.
Good day, Mr. Bart.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
On your, with regards to the memorandum of understanding with the Kenke Group and Siemens Energy, what exactly will follow in terms, you talk about it lays open the way for additional studies. So what exactly would they be looking for in terms of getting to a point where they may decide to sign a contract to carry through with whatever parts of the project that is necessary? I mean, what are they looking for? That's one. And secondly, now the Elevate program is essentially a medium to long-term strategy with regards to young people and young persons who are at risk. But in terms of the proposed new strategies of the police force, are those strategies likely to result in reduced homicides in the Federation in the short term? Would you respond to those?
Yes, thank you. I will answer the last one and then the former question. With respect to their strategies, if you look at the first quarter, I think where they would have applied that strategy, especially in the areas that they would have deemed high risk, they had significant positive results. And death by violent means went down, and crime overall went down compared to 2023. And so the police now, the security apparatus beyond the police even, is putting strategies in place, more strategies in place to deal with what we are seeing. So we're going to see short-term benefits from those interventions as well. So we are looking at the short-term, the medium-term, and the long-term. And so when we are back here again, we will see the results of those strategies. But let me say clearly, if a particular strategy is applied and that does not work, we do not stop there. We will work and work until we get the right strategy, being evidence-based. So in that sense, I will say yes. So we have seen some tangible benefits already from the first quarter. And just today, the police high command, as I mentioned before, along with the commander from the Defense Force, met with the whole of cabinet discussing the strategies going forward. And they have presented a comprehensive plan going forward. And so that will be evaluated and assessed, because we have to deal with the short term, medium term, and the long term as well. Now, with respect to the investment that is to take place with the geothermal, as you know, they have signed an MOU, which is significant. If we know who Semen is, and we know who the KNK group from the UAE as a group, who they are. The Semen has signed that MOU, and they want to now come. We have sent them all the information that we have, and they are now coming in to, of course, do their own preliminary assessment, or their own assessment rather. And that would determine, then they will put forward what would be their proposal with respect to geothermal. But you don't reach to that stage unless you are very, very interested. As a matter of fact, when I was in Dubai, Siemens sent one of their worldwide executive, to witness the signing of the MOU. And so we know we are already on a very strong path. But apart from that, remember, we have multiple layers to this. We also submitted to the Saudi Development Fund to get a concessionary loan of $20 million to start drilling. We have $17 million from the CDB. That $20 million will be $37 million, so that we can build out the first part, drill the first part of the geothermal. So this is going to happen one way or the other. And we have allocated where the resources are coming from. As a matter of fact, we have now before the Saudi Development Bank Board, which is going to meet later this week, which will be the end of this month, to determine that, of course, they have to go through the process. Already we know that they have helped us with about $40 million for the new generators, modern generators that can use both the LPG and the LNG, or what we call two different types of sources, right, of gases. So we can use either, but of course we want the one that is more environmentally friendly. I think those can give us maybe close to 20 megawatts together combined. So we are transforming our energy sector. And with that, with the geothermal being a part of it now, that is going to lead us to the renewable future. Why is it important? Because developing the geothermal, if you look at the IMF report, 1, the revenues to be had are significant. 2, cheap energy for our people. 3, with cheap energy, you create a very favorable environment for investments. And 4, it is renewable, protects the environment. And so the geothermal to be developed as an asset owned by the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis is tremendous. And people are excited. People are excited. And that is why we are now raising the necessary funds in order to that will give us the opportunity to develop that resource. So I want to thank the Premier of Nevis, the leader of the opposition, that we have done the politically matured thing. Whatever the differences we might have politically, let us not deprive the people of Nevis, especially, of developing this resource. And let us not deprive the people of St. Kitts by extension of the development and benefits that we can have and derive from this resource. I want to say something that the Premier said. In the last administration, when CDB brought the document for the then Prime Minister to sign, who was the Minister of Finance, so that this could have been done in Nevis, even back then, he refused to sign it. The Premier himself has said that. Even though they were in the same cabinet, he refused to sign it. And the thought was, he was thinking, oh, this is for Nevis, and Nevis people are going to benefit, and St. Kitts people, he's thinking might be at a disadvantage. How can he be thinking like that when they were talking unity? This is going to be developed on Nevis, which is obvious, for the benefit of the whole federation. That is what makes sense. So it's quite interesting that they had a unity construct where they could not come together to really lead the pathway for the development of geothermal. But it now takes a Labour administration with CCM in opposition and the leader of the opposition, who was a former member of the previous administration, to put the politics aside, come together as one, in unity, as they say, and determine that this resource must be developed for the benefit of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. So I will say that the MOU is the start. They are now going to come in, look at all the data that we have. They are going to study their own data. But the fact that CMN and this group, the K&K group, came together to sign this in the UAE, they have already embarked upon really getting their proposal ready to bring forward to the Federation. So I would say, Mr. Bat, that they are very much on their way.
Just to follow up on that, so the K&K group would be the financial component of that program, and Siemens Energy would be the technical component.
Correct. Okay. And not only that, Siemens themselves say that they can also engage in financing if necessary. But exactly how you pointed it out is exactly how it is. And I met with a number of ministers, 2 ministers from the UAE, who have looked at it and see it as being very viable. But the exciting news is we have multiple pathways, even though this is the one that we're moving forward with to develop the geothermal. I also met with the chair of IRENA, International Renewable Agency. We met at COP28, where they have discussed. And one of the things that they discussed when I was in the UAE is that the resource in Nevis is large and it can be developed. So even IRENA wants this resource to be developed as well. So we have IRENA, we have CMN and the KK group, and we have the potential of getting that the concessionary loan from the Saudis, and then our own response here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So the geothermal is very much on its way in terms of being developed for the benefit of all of us in the Federation.
Good afternoon, Devon Cornelius.
Yes.
That I said, to continue you left off from regarding the MOU for the geothermal energy project, explain in detail in terms of the delivery, time frame for this project, and the management of the project. And as you spoke about the developing the resource, is it that you're looking at partnering with other countries in the Caribbean region? Speak to that, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Very good question. The MOU is actually not between St. Kitts and Nevis and Seamen or any of them, this specific one. It is directly between those 2 entities. And the MOU brings them together for them to now come into St. Kitts, look at, and St. Kitts and Nevis, specifically Nevis, look at the resource and put a proposal forward. That is what they're coming to do. Now, you asked the second part of the question. Just remind me of what that was.
So that was, as you mentioned, developing the resource there on Nevis.
Yes.
I wanted to find out if it's related to partnering with other countries.
Right,
in the
good.
region.
Right. Now, that is a very good question. Now, the resource on Nevis can provide, let's say, between 500 megawatts and a gigawatt. That's a lot of energy. St. Kitts and Nevis together, we use maybe 40 megawatts. So if this can give us a gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatts, that's 960 megawatts of energy and that energy can power a good part of the Caribbean. And so the thought is, that is where the revenue aspect of this development becomes crucial and important, that those extra megawatts can actually be sold in ammonia, green ammonia, hydrogen, or you can run undersea cables to power other countries and other islands here surrounding St. Kitts and Nevis. That is where CBI comes in. CBI is specialized in building undersea cables to transmit energy. But a matter of fact, when they look at St. Kitts and Nevis, between St. Kitts and Nevis, about 5 kilometers, and it's about 20 feet, the depth. You know, they joke and say, this is a cable you can just pull. They mean an extension cord. So it's not significant in terms of getting the technology or the cable that would be necessary to connect St. Kitts and Nevis. Because part of what we are doing with Nevlec and Skelec is to form one grid. And then we put all of our energy in it, and St. Kitts and Nevis would benefit significantly. So even the work we are doing over here, Nevis will benefit from that with the solar plant that we are doing. CBI is also looking at wind. CBI has developed wind turbines that can produce up to 20 megawatts of energy. One can provide up to 20 megawatts. They are, of course, the only company with that technology where one wind turbine can produce up to 20 megawatts of energy. That is where they're going with the technology. They have already those that can provide 7, 10 megawatts. That's a lot of energy. Thinking that St. Kitts alone need 27, 30, let's say 30. Nevis need 10. So you get 3 of those turbines and you solve the problem for St. Kitts and Nevis in terms of energy. And it's significantly cheaper. Of course, wind is not consistent. You know, if the wind is blowing, you get. If it's not blowing, you don't get. And then the other thing that we'll discuss, the noise from the turbines. What they have is a new technology where these turbines spin slowly. So the noise is not a factor like the old technology. But even though they spin slower, they produce much more energy without producing all the noise and noise contamination and so forth. So in a sense, we are looking at multiple aspects in which we can develop the energy here in St. Kitts and Nevis, not just geothermal, but solar, geothermal, and wind. And I have engaged them on the possibility of waves. But thus far, we haven't discussed those 3 sources.
Ian Richards of the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service. Prime Minister, with growing instability in the Middle East and the threat of new conflicts growing in that region and also in Europe, perhaps, how do you see this impacting the Citizenship by Investment program? And what steps can be taken to ensure that it remains viable and secure? And also in relation to investments and conflicts, you mentioned that you would have met with a number of investors while you were overseas. And of course, there is the potential threat of a conflict between Guyana and Venezuela. Was that a concern that was discussed between the meetings with the investors? Because, of course, the Caribbean has long been known as a zone of peace, and Guyana is a member state of CARICOM, as is St. Kitts and Nevis. And so there is the potential that St. Kitts and Nevis and CARICOM can be drawn into a conflict, and the whole region can become destabilized, which, of course, would affect investment.
So the CBI program and investment because of regional conflict. From the CBI perspective, in terms of what's taking place in the Middle East and Europe and so forth, you might have more interest in the CBI program in the sense that, can I get to a region to invest that is safer? So you can have increased interest. So that can be a positive in terms of persons who would want to invest in St. Kitts and Nevis. The CBI program is a program that is vital to us. I keep saying one of the significant errors, a number of significant errors were committed by the last administration. One of them being becoming too dependent on the CBI program. We have always held the position that we should not depend too heavily on any one sector for our economic stability and growth. We have always spoken about diversity, a diversification of the economy. For example, tourism. You can't just be standing on one leg. When you stand on one leg, you easily fall down. And so the idea is to create multiple legs to keep the economic system standing. And so we made a significant error in shifting to be too dependent on this. However, the CBI is important. Why is it we had to make those significant changes? You know very well about what happened with a particular project, 5,500 citizenships for one prison project, which can give up to 25,000 citizenships. I have said that. Bound, the government, as you know, is continuous, even though administrations change. But you lock the government into that. That is a serious matter. And I had to make sure that I make necessary changes to let our international partners know that this is a serious country and we are serious about the international security and their own security. And so we made the necessary changes in terms of strengthening due diligence, in terms of making sure that our partners understand exactly what we are doing. Those changes, I know, to some extent, were criticized as being draconian by some. But I had no choice to some extent but to make sure that the changes would protect our visa access to areas where we have visa access. We have seen what the European Union has done. Had we not done those, I'm certain we would have lost visa-free access to certain regions already. We saw a country in the Caribbean that lost its visa-free access. We acted aggressively and quickly and was able to prevent that from happening to St. Kitts and Nevis. And those are because of the poor decisions made by the previous administration. And we see what's out there in the media. But my objective is to be straight up and honest with our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis and to make decisions that would protect our reputation as far and as much as possible. And that is why, Ian, I had to make those necessary changes so that today we can talk about a CBI that can be viable. That is why we're talking about the Gateway Summit in July. We shifted it from May to July as people becoming very interested in the program of St. Kitts and Nevis once again. And you see that the initiative to get an MOU between the countries, we have 4 countries that have signed. And that MOU is critical and crucial as well. And I encourage all countries to sign. It's important. And so where I acted and people thought, okay, what are you doing here? Now people are recognizing clearly why I acted the way that I acted. And I will continue to criticize the former administration for decisions that were unnecessary, that put us at risk. We are at risk still, less risk because of the measures we have taken. But I want the people who are interested in St. Kitts and Nevis to know that this is a stable program, a program for the long term, and investing in St. Kitts and Nevis is good. We are open for business. I said that on the 7th of August, 2022, when I asked that the restrictions as a result of COVID be lifted based on scientific data. And since then, we have been open for business, and our economy has been growing. We lagged a bit in our growth because we took too long to open the country. The previous administration, again, took too long to open the country because of politics. They had the data since months before that they could have opened up the country safely, but they refused to do it. But because of my medical training and background, I knew that the data suggests that we could have opened up St. Kitts and Nevis. That is why one of the first decisions I made, even before the full government was sworn in, but as Prime Minister, was to lift these restrictions, open back up the country, and let the Kittitians and divisions go back to work so that they can, of course, start the rebuilding of their lives. A lot of people have not recovered from COVID as yet. So a lot of the issues that we are speaking about around the economy, we know where the genesis is, but we also understand from the IMF report that the economy is growing and bouncing back. And the IMF has applauded the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, has applauded the government of St. Kitts and Nevis for lifting the restrictions and opening up the country. That led to our resurgence in the recovery of our economy. So the conflict that you are speaking about with respect to the Caribbean, As you know, I am the chair for the RSS. I am going to travel to Venezuela Friday for an official visit, my first visit as the Prime Minister. And part of my messaging will always be, let us maintain this area as a zone of peace. As you can see, we had an Argyle agreement, which St. Kitts and Nevis signed on to. I was present in person at those discussions when Guyana and Venezuela, both leaders, sat face to face, man to man, and had frank discussions. And an agreement was reached. And when I go to Guyana, that is my message. And I was there when I took over chair of the RSS. And when I go to Venezuela, that will also be my message. I believe in diplomacy, dialogue, and I also believe in peace. That will be the message of St. Kitts and Nevis to both countries, that we should maintain this area as a zone of peace. Because you're right, Ian, conflict would affect all of us. And you're speaking to the fact of conflict would affect investor confidence. That's a very good question. And that is why we don't want any conflict in the region, because it would affect all of us. However, I am very optimistic that we can achieve what we seek to achieve in terms of maintaining this area as a zone of peace. Of course, that's optimism, and I can only speak to that. But in terms of creating an environment that is investor-friendly, that is what we are doing presently. And that is why you see so many investors are back on board. If you look at the last administration, how many major investments came to St. Kitts and Nevis? No hotel. We already have a hotel here that broke ground, going through the final stages in less than 2 years. We have a hospital that is going to break ground very soon. Investment in water. I'm not just talking about the Keon well, which is going to be a few millions in the end. I'm talking about the major desal plant to provide 2 million gallons that is supposed to be signed this week. I'm talking about the solar plant. The solar plant that they're speaking about, that investor was brought into St. Kitts and Nevis by the previous Labour administration. When we picked up the paper, it was incomplete and it was a bad deal for St. Kitts and Nevis. And we sought to renegotiate it for it to make sense. For example, you can buy it down, you can invest in it, and it is also less expensive for us. And so we are going to launch that as well. Housing, significant investment. So we have had investments now in significant sectors. And if you go back to the previous administration, if you ask about any investment, there was hardly any foreign direct investment, not even the Ramada they can choose, because we know. But I'm simply saying that there was hardly any. However, within less than 2 years, we are seeing significant investments. Tell them, show you something. They will build a school, no school. The hospital was leaking for years. For all they're saying about the hospital was leaking until 2 weeks ago. For all the talk they're talking about MRI, the MRI building is being constructed as I speak. So the Ministry of Health has rebounded significantly positively, to the point where we reached the lowest infant mortality rate for children between the lowest rate of deaths for children between 1 and 4 years old. We had none in 2023. First time in our history, the lowest infant mortality rate in history. Those are because you have a strong health system. Those things don't happen by accident. You need robust social policy, but you need a strong health system in order to do that. And those children who would have died benefited from the Children's Health Fund that I started very early in the administration. So I know I spoke to other things, but to the heart of your questions, there's more interest in our program in the Middle East and beyond. And I am optimistic that we'll continue to be a zone of peace here in the Caribbean, because you are right. Any type of conflict will, of course, be a negative impact on investor confidence.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Kevin Brown, Win FM. The IMF, in the recently concluded spring meeting, suggests for St. Kitts and Nevis enhancing the rule of law, improving the business environment, addressing informality, tackling crime and violence, specifically in St. Kitts and Nevis. What are your thoughts on this assessment and their continued warnings to emphasize tax reform, revenue mobilization to reduce reliance on the CBI program? Additionally, as Minister of Health, based on any preliminary reports you got from the simulation at the hospital last night, how was the response by all parties involved in terms of readiness for catastrophic failure, as it has been quantified? And will an assessment of the findings be public?
Good. So, with respect to the IMF, of course, the IMF has also revealed its assessment, and its assessment is basically what we have been discussing. Now we are analyzing it because it just came out as well. But the Article 4, which is the full assessment, you will see, and also. But I think overall, it's a positive assessment. And therefore, we are very, mindful of that. However, there are challenges. What I see as a significant challenge is the diversification of the economy, especially to cut the reliance on the CBI and to diversify the economy. That is why we are seeking to establish the energy sector. So if you look at the IMF report or its summary that it released, you will realize it spoke about the energy sector and how developing the energy sector can help St. Kitts and Nevis to become very self-sustaining, thus helping us to develop what we call the sustainable island state. And that, I think, is where we are heading. Because the issue again was, why would you allow your economy to become so dependent on one sector? That is where the matter is in terms of where we are going forward. Now, you spoke to the other things, in terms of the tax reform and so forth. We have been in discussion with the IMF on those matters. We were of the opinion initially that we did not want to increase taxes, especially after COVID, because, as you know, businesses were in recovery mode, people were in recovery mode. And if you were to adjust the taxes such that any sector had to pay more, we think it could have negatively impacted them. And so we held back the increase in the taxes. Very fortunate, we are looking at it closely because it's critically important that we look at it closely, and we will continue to look at it. Because at the end of the day, you have to sometimes make the tough decisions that will keep everything stable and in order. Are there threats? Yes. The threat is fundamentally because of the CBI. And I've been saying that from day one. That is why you see me rush to open the country on the 7th of August, 2022, so that the economy could have gotten a good chance to recover. And hence, we would not have to depend so heavily on one sector. So there are warnings, and there are also opportunities as well that we are looking at that we'll continue to take advantage of. So as I send out the report, we look at the report, and we will do that and see where we have to make necessary adjustments.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Yes. And the hospital, I wanted to answer that one. Yes, so they have done the simulation, and I'm glad that you raised that point. Because last night, when the lights went off at the hospital, we saw all sorts of crazy things in the social media. Oh, the hospital in darkness. Oh, there's a crisis at the hospital, and so forth. And you would think that responsible people could have, would pick up the phone and make a call and find out what is going on. Instead, they got to social media to build the anxiety, unnecessary anxiety of our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. But I would say again that these tests are totally necessary. I do not have the full report yet. As you know, it just happened last night. We will get the full report. And the reason why we want that is that wherever there are issues, you correct them, and then you might have to run a test again. Because sometimes you think things are in order because you have not been hit by a disaster of a significant magnitude for some time. So you have to simulate it. Hence, you hear the sounds as if something blew out, because in a disaster, things can blow out. You see smoke, in a disaster, things blow out, you create smoke. All those were very much controlled. But what did not happen is that the people were not informed because you wanted it to be as realistic as possible. What we made sure of is that nobody was in ICU on any machine, no life was at risk. The only thing you would have darkness for a short time. Now we're going to look at the preliminary results to see where there might have been failures, issues, and so forth. And where they are, we will just make sure that we get them done. And if we have to test again, we will test again. So that is where we are at. So I'm happy that you recognize that this was a simulation, and through your medium, you will inform the people of St. Kitts and Nevis that there was no crisis at JNF. What took place there was a simulation that was managed by various agencies so that we can determine how ready we are to deal with any major disasters.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister, colleagues.
Yes.
I have 3 questions I'd like to ask. If you don't mind, I would prefer to ask individually. The first one I have to ask is in respect of geothermal. I'm going back there.
Yes.
And more broadly, energy. One of the things which has stymied natural energy production in neighboring islands, such as that where I hail from, Antigua and Barbuda, for example, where the notion of a solar farm was come up with, and there is a small one at the airport. Storage has always been the issue, whereas it is relatively inexpensive when the costs for this is examined. The storage, so that none of the energy generated or tapped into goes to waste, has always been very expensive. What are we looking at in respect of storage for these energy sources that we're looking to tap into for export especially?
So that is a very good question. Now, the geothermal, as you know, you can store, and you can store with heavy metal, which might take place at the large one. Now, there's a new technology called solid-state supercapacitors, which the 4th generation is installed here in Sunset Reef, which is a boutique resort in the West Farm area. It is the only one in operation in the world, that 4th generation. And so that we are looking at also to engage as a possible means of storage of the energy. The energy storage, as you said, can be expensive. Cost of energy storage is going down as the technology improves. And so I think that in terms of storage, which you are correct, we will be in a position to store more of that energy. And that would help us, instead of out, to have energy even when it gets dark because of that storage. Even we can maybe have up to 16 hours between sunlight and storage so that most of the day is covered with renewable energy. Now, so that was the first one. I think you wanted a second one? Okay.
So my other question
Yes.
has to do with Prime.
Yes.
Go back to Prime.
Right.
In the discussion of Prime, one of the things that I keep hearing is that Prime is up, Prime is up.
Yeah.
And I think what the real issue is, and the debate is in the public forum, is that the homicide rate
Yes.
is up.
Yes.
You mentioned for the first quarter, crime was down. Do you, one, think it is important, or does it have a place in this conversation to make that distinction in the homicide rate increase as opposed to a broad increase in crime? Because I'm looking at how it affects the image of the country outside the region when we just broad brush it and say crime is up as opposed to identifying the areas of crime.
Very good question. Overall, I will tell you that the other crime were down. In the first quarter, everything came down. It's just after the second quarter start that we saw a surge, which we are now dealing with. But you are very correct. You just cannot paint a broad brush and say that because one type is up, everything is up. That is not so at all. And we're not seeing that reflected in our statistics. However, we have to recognize if there's a surge in a particular area that we have to deal with it. But you are correct in thinking that in the broad spectrum, let us look and see where the situation is located. And the situation is right here, which we are dealing with. Now, you ask if we, in the first quarter, the second quarter, if we should look at the first quarter separately from the second quarter. Maybe you're hearing that. The reason why we do that is to see the strategies implemented. Are they being effective? Are they working? And we saw significant results, positive results in the first quarter. The second quarter, we saw an upsurge, and which we are dealing with. But I would say that St. Kitts and Nevis continue to be very stable and therefore there is no significant threat to our stability when it comes to that. And we are in a position to deal with what is taking place at this time. So as I told Glenn, in the short term, the medium term, and the long term, we will be addressing it.
The final question I have for now, if we have time, and I'll ask others. There was a DBS News out of St. Lucia news story that made its way into the Kittitian realm this week, Kittitian and Division realm, and this had to do, again, with the CBI program, some policies implemented by the previous administration, which may bring both the program and the country under some scrutiny. Are you concerned about the issues raised in the DBS News report? Is your administration taking any measures to combat any negative fallout which may occur as a result of the issues which have been raised there? Some of it coming from most of it coming from inquiries from MSR Media Group, which has produced a number of movies in Nevis.
Yes, that is a very, very critical question. We are monitoring the situation very closely. As you know, this administration cannot be implemented. It's not implemented in any of those things. However, government is continuous, and I will always work to create the best St. Kitts and Nevis that we can possibly have. And so that is why you see that I made changes that I made so that it can be clear in everyone's mind that this administration is serious when it says it's going to practice the principles of good governance on all levels, even in our CBI program. So we are monitoring the situation. However, the changes that we have made thus far, they have been received very well. We have been able to maintain our visa access to various parts. We now see investor confidence strong again in our program. And therefore, we see our program as a strong, vibrant, stable program that investors should have confidence in. However, what took place in the last administration, I think that is what the MSR situation is all about. However, as the Prime Minister, I will do all to protect St. Kitts and Nevis and its reputation. But so far, our reputation, it has risen. People are confident again, and our program is vibrant. And that is why I had to travel to the UAE or the Middle East and say to the world, St. Kitts and Nevis is definitely back. See, those are the unfortunate things that sometimes you have to deal with. I mean, when I was speaking about it, probably people thought I was just talking politics. Now I think people are understanding. Had we continued on that path, we as St. Kitts and Nevis would be today. I can say to you, I'm not sure we would have had our visa-free access. I can say to you that people would have been drawn into court from high offices. But I am making sure that we continue to practice good governance and make sure our reputation is well and is intact. St. Kitts and Nevis is serious when it comes to the table to deal with any issue or any matter. So that is the image that we are projecting at this time.
Mr. Prime Minister, I have a number of questions. Two related to CBI, and there's another one that I shall ask first. What is the government's policy now in relation to health tourism? I note, for example, there is a facility, an unopened facility at the Royal St. Kitts Hotel. And some years ago, I think it's post-2015, there was an interest in establishing a health facility in the Christopher Harbour region. So I need to find out what is the policy on that, and also in relation to medical research taking place in the Federation. One would recall the situation with the stem cell research that created a storm in the Federation. Secondly, I further need clarity on the prison project. Now, you have indicated there are about 5,000 allocated citizenship allocations for this project. Are you bound by the original agreement to in terms of the price, the undersold price, the so-called undersold price, or are these being processed at the new level of pricing that is supposed to be legal, the legal standard? And my next question in relation to the CBI is, what is the level of confidence does your government have in relation to Chinese investors in the CBI program? Because there's still a number of unfinished, unopened Chinese projects on the island, and there might be some legal issues also with regards to what is happening by Chinese agents of CBI in China itself. Could you comment on those?
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Baird. With respect to health tourism, this government is very interested in health tourism, not just from the perspective of the Christopher Harbour investment or from the Royal St. Kitts. The one at Royal St. Kitts, I met with new investors and they want to go forward with that. And that would have the blessings of the government. Of course, looking at all the regulations and laws and so forth. The one at Christopher Harbour, I think at some point there was a possibility. I think it was scaled down and came to Royal St. Kitts. Since then, Royal St. Kitts has transformed into something else, which we are seeing built out now. So I would say the government's position is that we want health tourism. The other matter is we are now going into building a new hospital, which is going to break ground very, very soon, within the next 2 weeks. We are going to create a health city. The health city will be where Ross University is. Ross University Vet School, then there is UMHS, you'll have the hospital, you'll have a research center, which I'll speak to because you asked about it, and then we will also have private medical centers to complement what we are going to construct there. And that medical city, we want to become an area where health tourism can also be pursued. For example, you can have even patients from around here, St. Eustatius, Anguilla, and so forth, who can come into St. Kitts and be able to access some of those services. That is why we're talking about kidney transplant and new MRI system, new CT scan system, fluoroscopy, more specialists at the hospital, brand new hospital, upgrading, becoming an accredited institution. So all that is to make sure that we provide, first and foremost, good healthcare, improve healthcare for our people, and secondly, be able to really extend that service to those who are not from St. Kitts and Nevis through health tourism. So we are pursuing that in private sector and within the public sector even. All right? Now, with respect to the medical research, from the medical research end, we are going to engage in medical research. We are going to open a medical research center because we want to create the concept of One Health. That is where Ross University comes in the sense that, and we have signed on to it, an MOU about One Health with the Ross University School of Medicine, with human, because we can see diseases go from animal to human being. So we want to make sure that we're on top of that. You heard about avian flu and bird flu and swine flu and all sorts of things. These are some flus that cross from one species to the next. And therefore, the concept of One Health, we want to build it out here. So you'll see that medical city being built in St. Kitts and Nevis, and it will start very soon. I'm talking about it will start in weeks. And again, that is because this is a progressive government. In less than 2 years, we are pursuing the construction of a more modern hospital that will offer good, improved services to our people and to those who come in. But let me say that before I go on to the next part of the question, even in our present hospital, we have invested significantly in a CT scan, brand new 125 slice that will be installed very soon. MRI, most modern, the construction of the housing has already started. Most specialists ever at Genève Hospital. We have also invested in the physical structure to stop leaking at the hospital. We have invested in machines, anesthesiology or anesthetic machines, are the machines used to put people breathe on when they're under anesthetic. We have offered extended renal services, including transplant. We have improved our mental health services at the hospital by getting a doctor of psychology at the hospital. We have restarted eye surgery. Remember, under the last administration, no eye surgery. Eye surgery stopped because there was no machines for certain eye surgeries. Immediately on taking office, that was one of the first things done, to buy and purchase to the tune of hundreds of thousands of US dollars, machinery, equipment rather, so that those eye surgeries can take place. And today, we have scores of eye surgeries taking place at JNF. So all these have been improvements since we have taken office. If you go to the hospital, the foyer, we are repairing. If you go to the hospital, we have set up a new system for the blood bank. And that is why I want to thank Dr. Jensen Morton and the team at the JNF Hospital for their hard work, and the ministry in general. Regardless of what they're saying about health, we have improved significantly. We even have AC, air conditioning, and surgical and medical ward. If you go up there, you'll see AC. First time we have AC so extensively throughout a ward, maybe other than over at oncology. And we are now going to invest in the psychiatric ward as well. So I say all of that to say that we have invested heavily in healthcare thus far. So when it comes to research, the stem cell must never happen again in St. Kitts and Nevis. Can you imagine? You had doctors at the hospital who allow the stem cell to take place up there in our private ward. Can you imagine that? That violated many rules of ethics within medicine. A doctor from Brazil was on the ward with a stethoscope and had not been licensed by our medical board, practicing illegally. And when asked if the doctor is practicing, no, the doctor is not practicing. Well, if you see a carpenter with a hammer in a room with nails, you're going to ask if the carpenter is carrying out his trade or not? That would be the most logical thing. If you are a carpenter in a room with nails, then you hammer your nails. And that is why Dr. Patrick Martin lost his job, because he said you cannot have an illegal, unethical medical research program here at JNF that violates international regulations, because people will choose to use others as guinea pigs with no regulations. That all countries in the UN, we have signed on that those things will not take place, because remember, they used to experiment on black people. Tuskegee experiment. Is it out of those things that you shut down these illegal type of experiments that this stem cell research was here? But they didn't even stop there. They went on to the herpes research. And when the chief investigator for the herpes investigation was asked, why you choose St. Kitts and Nevis? He said it's a progressive jurisdiction. Do you know what that means? A progressive jurisdiction means, well, there ain't got much rules and regulation down there, I could do what I want. Brought people down here. Tell them they have the vaccine for herpes. People in high offices here sanction that. And then you see them on Facebook commenting. And then you say, if you know you commit these things and I have access to it, just be quiet and move on. Be quiet and move on. But those things will never happen under this administration. This administration will comply with international rules and regulations when it comes to research.
Just what you're saying is that you will put in place the necessary legal framework within which medical research can take place within the Federation.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Correct. We're already doing some medical research, and we'll make sure that we have to toughen them or set up frameworks to make sure that even stem cell can be done. There's nothing wrong if you have stem cell. It just has to be done within a particular framework. And TIGA adopted the legislation directly from St. Kitts and Nevis, almost word for word. And they now have a stem cell research sector down in Antigua. We would want to engage in that, but of course for it to be regulated and for nobody to say you are progressive jurisdiction, meaning that no rules and regulation there, go down there and do what you want. which happened with the stem cell and the herpes research. Now, you also asked about the PRISM project, and we in the CBI, we are making sure, especially going forward, that if there's a particular project that you have set out and we want that project to be completed. I mean, COVID could have affected some people. Other things could have affected people. I see your concern, Bat, and I'm not trying to sidestep it at all. And we are making sure in our new regulations that these things that would have been perceived to have happened don't happen with this program. We have to protect the program as much as possible. That is what I would seek to do. We cannot afford to lose this program at this particular time. So you are correct that we have to make sure that those who say that they'll carry out a project, that the project is completed. We have to work on that as well, if that is what the expectation of the investor is. So there have been very challenging questions with respect.
I'm still not clear.
Yes.
My question is the citizenship allocation to the PRISM project. Are those being transacted on the old reduced costings or the new higher costings?
Good. So when somebody comes in and make an investment, because there are two things here. If you have a particular project with a particular cost that was sanctioned by a cabinet, correct? Or there are manipulations within the markets to even carry the price lower than what was put forward. So there are two things here that is being discussed. If you make an agreement as a cabinet and lock the government in an agreement, to some extent that agreement is carried through. The other question that you're asking is within what is supposed to be agreed upon, is there violations of those things? That is the question that is also being asked. I don't know if you see where I'm coming. For example, somebody say you have to sell it at 10, but are there questions if being sold less than 10, for example? That is where a serious question also can be asked. But what we are saying is that we have tightened up our regulations so that those things don't happen or perceive to happen. That is what our regulation is. So when you ask about that, whatever the agreement was, that is what the investor entered in at that particular time. If it is the cost that is agreed upon and carried out, for example. Okay, there's that one. Or even though that was the cost, was there a cost lower than that actually took place? That is why we are putting what you call international due diligence agent. We are the first country to do that. So that even out there, we are monitoring to make sure that those things are not happening with our program. And other countries have expressed interest in having access to our international due diligence unit that we're going to set up in Europe. So even though you would have gone into the system or you're participating, we are making sure, monitoring that what we say should happen is what must happen, and that there is no sort of activity that is contrary to what the agreement will be. That is what we are doing as well.
On Chinese level of confidence. And on the matter of the level of confidence on Chinese investors, how confident are you now that upcoming Chinese CBI projects will be completed and will be operational? And as an extension to that, what are you doing right now with regards to the current unproductive, unfinished, unopened Chinese projects?
Right, so you had another question there. With respect to that, I wouldn't necessarily single out a particular country or group of people, but I understand your question. What we are going to make sure is that no matter where you're from or your background, that once you enter into this and this is a project to be developed, it has to be completed. For example, the projects that we have, the new ones that we have approved, I don't think any of them comes from China necessarily. No, none of them. What we have new, they come from, no, they don't come from, just reflecting on it, not from China. But I'm saying irrespective of country or irrespective of background, even if you're a Haitian, what you say you are going to set out to do, we want you to do that. So you'll be held accountable for that. And with respect to, you asked another question that was there in terms of the projects that have been done. Now, some of them were using the CBI as private investments as well. We sat as a cabinet and we look at a number of projects. And we are seeking to contact the investors and coming up. This is not an easy thing to approach. Contact the investors. What are your interests? And then we will ask, what is the country's interest in dealing with it? So today, I cannot say this is a comprehensive plan, but a comprehensive plan to have those completed, or do we have to now step in and say, look, we have to do something with this particular development, which we will also look at. But in terms of not completing projects on this new regulation, you have to complete your project or you will be held responsible as well.
3 final questions from me, Prime Minister, shifting gears a little bit. The Director of Public Prosecutions issued 2 releases focusing on uncooperative witnesses, one of which caused the murder case to be dismissed. And he also issued a public call for witness cooperation. What else is the police doing in collaboration with the DPP to increase witness cooperation? Additionally, what is police doing to ensure mishaps that could cause the dismissal of cases to not happen again in the future?
So, as you're saying, and I heard what you said, that was actually discussed, and I think a number of strategies are being put in place. All of them I cannot speak to, but I simply would say that this is being taken very, very seriously. And it was discussed already as to the measures that have to be put in place in order to make sure that witnesses are protected and the information is given so that we can have justice in the court one way or the other. So I can say that this is being addressed. Some of the specific things, you would not want to reveal because they're part of a whole strategy. But I can say it is being definitely looked at in a very serious way. And measures will be taken to ensure that we don't go down that path. This is not just affecting St. Kitts and Nevis, it's affecting the region, especially when you're in very close-knit societies. But it's a serious matter. And we have to look at it very seriously, which we are doing. As you know, we are looking at signing witness protection policies with other countries, agreements with other countries, rather. For example, Canada. That is one of the things that we are looking at. And other countries, so that our witness protection program can be strengthened. And if people ask for it, they can have access to it and they can be offered it. We have something in place already, and we are going to make sure that that is strongly in place so that this does not happen.
Right. Additionally, the Transitional Council in Haiti was established today, I think. We know that gangs launched fresh attacks on the capital because of the installation. How effective do you think the council will be in ensuring Haiti returns to some semblance of normalcy, specifically political normalcy, because I think that is where they're faltering.
Because I think when CARICOM stepped in and looked at it, CARICOM said, you need security, but you need a political solution as well. And this was seen as a broad consensus to bring varying interest groups together to form that council to help to bring back that political stability and set Haiti on a stage to have free and fair elections once again. It is never the thought that this would be easy, but I think this gives Haiti, based on the circumstances at this particular time, an opportunity to have some sort of political resolution. I know there are gangs already threatening the council and would not want the installation of the council and so forth. But I think there is multi-pronged approach, including that and including how you're going to set up a system to secure the people of Haiti. So is it challenging? Yes. Can we predict the specific outcome? Can't. But it gives Haiti a chance. And I think it will always be looked at. If one thing does not work, what else can be done? But I can say clearly that no one will give up, because an unstable Haiti and foremost affect the people of Haiti. Loss of lives, instability, broken families, broken communities. That's challenging for any human being to live in. And because Haiti is such a populous country, Haiti had maybe between 11 and 13 million people. The population of the OECS, for example, is 650,000. One community in Haiti, is larger than the population of the whole OECS. And if you have unstable Haitian people move out, you can easily destabilize the region. So that is why we have to be interested in this. First and foremost, for the people of Haiti, they deserve better. But secondly, for our own stability as well. So this gives an opportunity, but it will be challenging.
And finally, on the Venezuela-Guyana situation, we know that the US reimposed sanctions on Venezuela. How do you imagine that helping or harming the situation in Venezuela? Concerning, you already spoke to some of the implementations that you're going to go to meetings and figure out how to keep a zone of peace in the Caribbean region.
Right. So I think sanctions will affect them, economically and can have some impact politically. I also have to see the extent to which, or the extent of the new sanctions, because some had been lifted so that Venezuela would be able to export, some of their products, right? The fossil fuel products. So I would have to look at that. So I will see exactly what the specific changes were. However, that does not stop us in any way in continuing to pursue to maintain this zone or this area as a zone of peace. That has to be pursued. And so when I travel to Venezuela, that is one of the messages that I will bring. How can we maintain this area as a zone of peace? We have to see ourselves as part of the dialogue, using diplomacy to resolve this matter and not allow conflict to develop in the region that will not benefit any of us. So I will see the extent of the new sanctions, but sanctions based on the previous ones would have had some impact as well.
My final questions for you,
Yes.
Mr. Prime Minister. You spoke about traveling later this week as well to a CAFA meeting at which you will discuss, among other things, crime as a public health issue. So I'm going back to the crime issue again. A two-part question. Explain what that actually means so that the public can understand why crime is a public health issue. And the second part of that question would be for me, considering that it is a public health issue, is it important to involve the broader society into strategies which you have discussed, that you have, had high-up meetings with your national security advisors, including the Defense Force and Police? Because some years back, within the last decade, community policing was a very big thing where the people were actively asked to work along with, and the police were fostering relationships. That has broken down in the previous administration. Tactics seem to have been, let's just pay them to behave. And when I say pay them to behave, we're talking about the criminal elements. So we did see a dip during that time. However, not the most effective because it's not working. What do we do in respect of crime as a public health issue and including the broader society into discussion when dealing with these issues?
Excellent question. Crime as a public health issue has been discussed for some time now. The World Bank would have studied violence within the Caribbean, as CARICOM would have asked them. Other institutions would have studied violence in the Caribbean. Out of that, a number of strategies and recommendations would have been put forward. Whether they were comprehensively adopted or not is for us to determine. Now, violence as a public health issue is critically important. Let's look at it this way, and I can go into, for example, a model, a scientific model, that we call how do you transmit a disease. Is violence also a disease? So you have what you call the triad, for example. Apart from the obvious reasons when people get shot, injured, and so forth, that's public health. You have to take them to a hospital, use a lot of resources, and so forth. The mental health issues that deal with violence is also a public health matter to a great extent. So let's say you have an agent. The agent is what causes the illness. For example, you have a virus that causes the flu. That's the agent. The agent in this case is violence. For an agent to work, it has to be in the right environment. So you catch the flu easier during the winter or the cold season because the respiratory system, the defenses are lessened, and the potency, we call it the virulence rather, of the agent, which means the aggressive nature of the virus, which is the agent, is increased. So with those two things, having the right environment and a stronger agent or a more aggressive agent, chances of getting the flu increases. And then you have to look at a susceptible person. So who is the susceptible? So you need three things for it to work. So if violence is the agent, the environment in which you are living, if that is an environment that potentiates violence, and then you have the susceptible, which are the vulnerable people. So if you're living in a society and you have the susceptible, which are the vulnerable people, youth who are at disadvantage, people come from abusive homes, mental health condition, weakened socioeconomic situations make them very vulnerable. And then you have an agent. So you have the environment, they themselves are vulnerable. And then you have the agent, which is the violence. The violence actually moves around and is inherited. That is why people say, if you live in a home where there is a lot of aggression and violence, the chances that you become like that is very high. Because you're susceptible, as you're in a bad environment. You have the agent, which is the violence itself. And you're in a violent environment. So if you grow up in that, very likely you'll become violent. Not saying you must become violent, but very likely. So how do we cut that? So if you are susceptible for different reasons, you are neglected in a violent home or mental health issues, how do we take care of that? You're in an environment, how do we change the environment? And lastly, if you have that agent in the society, how do you extricate it and where does it come from? So we have really mapped it almost like any other disease. And all of these diseases are treated from a public health perspective. But why not violence? But it takes whole of society approach in order to deal with it. The whole of society has to deal from the home to the streets, to your community, to the schools, to the churches, wherever you go. Now, if you look at this study, the Caribbean is interpersonal violence in the Caribbean is probably the highest in the world. This is not a St. Kitts matter, it's a Caribbean matter. Is it as a result of slavery and coming out of a violent institution of slavery? Because, of course, during slavery, you had all three. You had violence, susceptible people who were enslaved people couldn't protect themselves. And then you had the agent. So you have susceptible, the environment, and the agent. But violence was practiced, so it was present. The agent was present. The environment, slavery. That's a violent environment. And three, the slaves were susceptible. And then that just becomes down and down and down and down and down. To the point where we really believe that beating our children is good. We really believe that. That is how we believe. That shouting down at them, it's okay. So we actually believe that violence is okay. Interpersonal violence. To the point where we laugh it off. If you're in St. Kitts or anywhere to the Caribbean, boy, the woman could abuse, she could abuse Abusing not gonna rule. We say things like that. And it comes off of our tongues very easily accepted. Look throughout the Caribbean. Why are we, when it comes to interpersonal violence, the highest in the world? It's a serious question that has been studied, and a number of solutions have been put forward. And that is why we have to now deal with it from a whole of society. So I want to say and announce today that we are ready now to launch our violence from public health. So we may not call it that, but that will be how we'll be dealing with it. I want to thank Dr. Isben Williams for really helping to champion this, not only in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we're going to now move to put that in place so that it can deal with the medium term and the long term and even the short term. Because no government alone can. If any government said they can do it, you laugh at them. Any measure that they put in will be temporary and it will fail. And if it's not comprehensive, can make the situation worse. Hence, we talk about the Farmer Peace Program. Those type of strategies were practiced before. Pay people and tell them, I'm paying you for peace. You can't pay for peace. How can you pay for it? You're either peaceful or you're not. That is not something you can buy. Look at what they did, for example. They tried it in Jamaica. They tried it in El Salvador. They tried it in Trinidad. Any country that they tried it in, eventually that country becomes so engulfed that is either they continue on the path of becoming worse. Haiti was a prime example of that, to the point where the gangs became so powerful that the gang just dislodged the government. That is, you say you can't pay for it. What we want to do, every life is precious. So all these persons, and young men and so forth, you want to give them real opportunities to change their lives and to build positive lives. But if you enter into a pack of just paying you for that, the end result of that is not going to be good for them, nor their family, nor the society, and it's not going to be good for us. So we have to come together as a country and as a society on the premise that each life is precious and create a scenario where we can help our people to have the best opportunity to develop a productive life. And that is what we are dealing with. I'm open about it. Since I went to the symposium in Trinidad, very open. Because I think for too long we are hiding the interpersonal violence in the Caribbean. We're hiding it. We have it between parents and children. We have it between persons in relationships. We have a lot of sexual violence. And somehow it's under here, and we hide it a lot. And people hide it. Let me tell you something. Like when I used to practice medicine, I would have, especially women, some women will come to my practice and you look for everything in the world to find out what they might be sick with. And you can't find anything. And then my last question to those would be, when did it happen? And they would say, Doc, what are you talking about? When did it happen? When were you violated? And they would give you the story. You just see the water start running down and they start giving you the stories. In the society, a lot of people know some of these things taking place with the children and so forth, being hidden. And that type of violence being expressed in different ways. Your boys being abused and neglected. And if you have an environment and then you throw guns into that, that is what is happening across the Caribbean. Very susceptible, very vulnerable, and then you give them the means by which they can do things. And therefore, we are saying the whole of society must be involved. That's the only way you can deal with it. From the church, to the school, to the streets, to the bars, we have to adopt non-violent culture on all levels. So that is what we'll be dealing with.
And then very quickly, the last one would have to do again with energy. We talk about the lowered rates for energy. What are the plans for actually selling this energy that's generated back into the national power grid? how are we going to ensure that the cost is kept low? Because sunlight is free, geothermal is already there, we have the volcano. But when it goes into the power grid, we have to offset the cost that it takes to generate and tap into it. How is this going to reflect the consumer?
So you're correct. So right now, I think we are paying maybe 60 cents, 60 US cents per kilowatt. That's very expensive. The solar plant is going to cast down, I think, to 17 cents. So people are going to see a significant drop in the electricity bill as a result of that. Now, the cost really is you have to operate and distribute and so forth. So it's the operational cost and so forth that you have to deal with. That is the cost that the consumer would have to pay. Now, what we are hoping for, Ebony, is that the energy, the excess energy, we can actually transform that into a different source, not a different source, but a different form, rather, whether it is green ammonia, hydrogen, however, and then sell that. Or you run undersea cables and deliver that energy to other islands. That is what we are looking for. But the cost of solar energy is expected to drop over time, which we are already seeing that. As the technology improves, we expect the cost to drop over time. I really believe they were going to reach a point where energy is just going to be available. Energy, water, and food are going to just be available. If human beings, if we don't kill off ourselves, we're very close to it. But energy, water, and food will be available. And one scientist predict that the commodity that will be most in demand will be entertainment, the orange economy. People want to see people sing, dance, and so forth, because you ain't got to worry about water, food, and energy. They're in abundance. A lot of wars in the past were over that, energy. And now we're seeing wars over water. But if you have energy, you'll have water, you'll have food. Simply to say that we are seeking to establish an energy sector where we'll be able to sell energy, whether by undersea cables or in different forms. And already we were approached by a firm from Trinidad, interested in buying the excess energy from the geothermal plant. They already want to sign an MOU with us.
Prime Minister,
yes.
Final question
Sure.
for me, based on the interest of time that has already elapsed. And it's also in relation to the energy aspect of it. Of course, now Sheikh Nevis recently signed an agreement with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that provides assistance in purchasing modern generators, and that's the term that was used on your Facebook page, modern generators to help power St. Kitts and Nevis's growth and expansion. Now, how do these generators fit, Prime Minister, into the Federation's goal of transitioning and becoming the first sustainable island state? Because someone asks, what is it powered with? Is it fossil fuel? Or how does that fit into the whole strategy?
So these generators, they can use LNG as well, which is is a renewable form of energy. It is not like the regular fossil fuel base. This is LNG. So that generator helps us to use that source, which is a renewable source of energy, or more environmentally friendly source of energy, rather. So that would help us to transition to a sustainable island state, of course, on the premise of sustainable energy production and so forth. But we need it. We know we have some generators that are old. When we came in, one of the things that we did was that we bought new generators and we fixed one of the major generators. I think it was a 6 megawatt generator that we had to send to France to fix a major part to get it back up and running. We know that we need new generators at NISMAS so that we can have our baseline steady, right? And that is why we have decided to buy these type of generators, which can use this more environmentally friendly source of energy and help us to maintain our base. But that is a good thing about geothermal. That baseline that you need, not the fluctuation as you get from wind and solar, but that constant baseline that you need, geothermal can provide that because it is just heat from the ground. And the heat comes from the lava that, of course, turns water into steam. And this steam drives the turbines that produces energy. And that can be, even whether wind blow or sunshine, it's hot. And therefore, that can help us tremendously in terms of needing less use of the generators if we were to get that source of energy. So the future is very bright when it comes to these opportunities for energy sources. But there are threats, of course, from the CBI that we have to deal with, and we are dealing with as aggressively as possible. Our CBI, because of the changes and what we had to go through, and we position it and so forth, that might, in the short term, be affected. But we are now seeing a renewed interest in the new product, and mainly because people saw what happened in Europe and saw what happened to a fellow country in the Caribbean. And so they're saying St. Kitts was right. And therefore, St. Kitts was ahead in creating a stable product for the long term.
Dr. Jim, my final question. In your opening statement, you made mention of meeting with investors in the area of developing a performing arts center. And I'm trying to see how we can tie this to the crime and violence in the regions, specifically St. Kitts and Nevis, in terms of providing that art form for young people to hone their skills and all of that. So with the development of this performing arts center, what areas will your administration focus on in performing arts? And how would this benefit St. Kitts and Nevis in terms of economic activity?
Good. That's a very good question. The orange economy is a very interesting economy, and it's probably $1 trillion, $1 trillion producing aspect of the economy by now. Now, that performing arts center would help to train our people in different areas, music being fundamental. There's also dance, cultural performances, or cultural acts that can be developed. It is clear to see that once you have that type of product, that product can be exported, for one. For example, look at Jamaica, for example. They have a very robust orange economy. Their artists are sent out all the time. They bring back a lot of revenue to Jamaica, to advance Jamaica. And within Jamaica, they are able to hold concerts of such levels of their local artists that they can bring people into the country. Think about Bob Marley, for example. Bob Marley's image as a musician, and beyond, of course, that image attracts people to Jamaica, which of course help the tourism and other aspects of the economy. St. Kitts and Nevis, I think we have a lot of tremendous talent. We want to hone that talent, develop that talent, and leverage that talent to help build the economy. But apart from that, imagine the young people or people in general who are involved in that. They can establish solid careers, livelihoods, build themselves, their families, their communities as a result. So this sector can have a tremendous positive impact, not only on the individuals, but on the community as a whole. And of course, as I just outlined, how it can benefit us economically. Can you imagine if St. Kitts that, producing big stars? We have Byron Messiah, for example. We have the opportunity to produce much more that can put St. Kitts on the map, draw people to St. Kitts and Nevis, which would have an economic impact. So we see that this center can be a center where we can have concerts, help to develop people, and create a sector, develop a sector, which can have tremendous economic benefits. And we have seen this in other countries. So it's not that we're reinventing the wheel. We are making sure that we have a wheel here and give people a real opportunity to develop themselves in this sector.
Just quickly, Mr. Prime Minister, just two quick matters. In relation to energy, similar to this situation with the solar energy project, in terms of the geothermal, have you been in discussion with the Premier or considering, for example, opening this new project to public shares, to have our people invest into this program? So that is one issue. And the other matter relates to tourism. And I am looking at our public beaches. two issues. There seems to be a threat to the public beach on Friars Bay. There is talk that there is a local business entity that is closing off part of the beach. Can you comment on this? Is it reality? Is it something that has to be looked into? And secondly, can you comment on the completion of the Frigate Bay Beach project, the upgrade?
So, with respect to Friars Bay, and that is a good question when it comes to the beach aspect, is that to make it clear that all beaches in St. Kitts and Nevis are public. There's no private beach, and we will not have a private beach. However, around the beach, people might own land, and people can determine what they do with their land, of course, in keeping with the overall government's policy. But what must happen is that you must have access to the beach. Let's say the person's land is here, and they say, okay, I'm going to use this for particular private whatever. Their land that is not the beach, they can have for private, but they cannot stop access to the beach itself. You have access to that. So in a real sense, I will say, Mr. Bad, that anywhere in St. Kitts and Nevis where people are denied access, that is illegal. And I'm not aware that people are being denied access to the beach. But since you raise it, I will seek to find out about it. But that is illegal. In St. Kitts and Nevis, all the beaches are public. However, the land close to the beach can be private. And especially in the peninsula where the government had very little ownership of land over there. Most of the land over there was always private. However, the beach itself is public. All right, and so if there's anything related to that, I will look into it and I will seek to find out issues with that. And then the second matter to do with the Frigate Bay enhancement, I have not had a recent update on it. I will say I'll have to find out with respect to that, not just to give you an answer for giving you an answer's sake, and find out from the ministry responsible for that, where is that project? But I know for sure, in the broad principle, we want that project to be developed. All right? Okay. So if you allow me, just give me 2 minutes. I want to just thank the media for really being here with me today, asking, of course, the pertinent and tough questions. And these questions should definitely be asked because the people are interested in these things. There are a number of things, of course, that I would quickly just drop a couple of lines on, that we have clear understanding. And I will go through them one by one. Okay. Now, we did not meet hardly any shovel-ready projects. The only project that was there that we saw was the prison project. And I know people will give an impression that they had shovel-ready projects. Show me the shovel-ready projects. No hotels, no school. The school was not shovel-ready. $21 million spent for school and not one brick laid, not one block laid. Again, the people's money going down the drain. So there was no shovel-ready hospital, no shovel-ready hotel, no shovel-ready schools. The only thing that was shovel-ready was a prison. And we already said exactly where we stand. Not even a shovel-ready water project, because remember, as the Premier of Nevis said, who was in the last administration, that project was stopped because a particular minister did not want it. Now, when it comes to the solar energy plant, that was not shovel-ready either. There were a lot of issues that needed to be resolved, especially the fact of the pricing, which we got down, and secondly, it did not give the opportunity for our people to invest. We made sure in the renegotiated plan that one, the price is lower, and secondly, our people can invest into it. It was a bad deal by the previous administration. Now, it is talk about the international travel, but I want to make it clear, I don't call it travel, I call it working abroad. Because when I have to go abroad, I'm involved in intensive work. For example, reaching that MOU between CMEN and the KK Group, K&K, for us to have a serious opportunity for investment in geothermal. I had to travel for that. For the other investments that came to St. Kitts, the hospital that we are partnering with the Taiwanese for, I had to travel for that. The hotel that is to be built, had to travel for that. The solar plant that we renegotiated, had to travel for that. The desal plant from the UAE, we had to travel for that. So we had to travel for multiple things in order to make sure that St. Kitts and Nevis can go forward. For the CBI, we had to travel for that. And so when the ministers travel, it is because we also have regional responsibility and international responsibility. My regional responsibility, I am the chair of RSS, I have to travel. I am the chair for CAFA, I have to travel. I can't negate those responsibilities because St. Kitts and Nevis cannot exist on its own. It has to have these regional and international partnerships. CAFA, RSS, and of course to attract investments to St. Kitts and Nevis. All those major investments coming to St. Kitts and Nevis now is because you travel and you bring them into St. Kitts and Nevis. And so that is why after each trip, I come before the people in a roundtable to have a conversation and lay out the benefits of that particular travel. Good, we discussed that one. The MRI. I want you all to go to the hospital and see the MRI building is being constructed. Again, people talk and talk, but when you get there, very little. Very little. And so we had to put a plan in place to get the procurement for a proper MRI building and the MRI in itself. 7 years and no MRI delivered, and already we are delivering the MRI. And so when people talk about the MRI, the only MRI they were really interested in was the MRI at the Biomedical Center, aka Monkey Farm, that I said we will put an end to. Talk about the number of passports. 25,000 possible passports for a prison. The previous Prime Minister should be questioned about this. That was totally unnecessary, putting our CBI program at severe risk. And we see, as you asked the question about lawsuits being being in the play at this point in time. Talk about water in K-On, that no water in K-On near 2 years. Should be quiet on certain things. You had 7 years and did not deliver water. And in less than 2 years, we are delivering water. I mean, you should clap the present administration. Round of applause you should give the present administration for that. And therefore, the issue of democracy. Don't talk about democracy. St. Kitts and Nevis now has the most stringent good governance laws in the whole Caribbean. And we are the most compliant. At this particular time, under the previous administration, they spoke about good governance. And they did not put it into effect. After 7 years, but in less than a year, or by a year and a half, could have been less than a year, we had good governance in place where I have to comply. And the members of cabinet have to comply, and a number of other persons. And you had 7 years and never did it. And we did it in less than a year. And therefore, I'm simply saying, on these matters, there is no ground to stand on. And it's better, you say, you sidestep. You know, in cricket, how you play cricket? All of us love cricket. When you are batting, for those of us, and all of us play cricket at some point, when somebody bowl a good ball, you just leave it alone. Just say, I leave that alone. That's a good ball. So if the geothermal is a good ball, leave that alone. If the water in Keyon is a good ball, leave that alone. If our good governance law is a good ball, leave that alone. If the recovery of the economy is a good ball, leave that alone. If the hospital coming is a good ball, leave that alone. If the solar plant is a good ball, leave that alone. All of these massive developments that are now coming our way, just leave them alone. Talk about something else. But I would like to say the reason why we had a delay in these significant investments is because there was no shovel-ready projects. We had to go and we negotiated them, bring back investors, seek new paths. And anybody knows that to have a major development, you need about 1.5 to 2 years when you have to go through all the planning and procurement, financing, and so forth. And that is why you're going to see a number of projects just rolling out. I'm going to wrap up by saying, look at my own constituency. Connery Playfield, they wanted that for many years. The Honorable Cedric Liebert made the first attempt, fencing it, bringing part of it, up to a certain standard. In 2013-14, under the Labour administration, we fenced the Connery field, and Connery had to wait another 7 years for their stadium to be built. 7 years. And nothing done for the people of Connery. That's a major project, over a $5 million project in Connery, and providing local employment. When we go to the St. Peter's Road, all of the other roads, the main roads in St. Kitts and Nevis done. Timothy Harris refused, the former administration refused to do the St. Peter's main road, saying it's not part of the road network. St. Peter's is the largest community outside of Bastia presently and growing. And if you looked at the road in St. Peter's with the potholes and how deteriorated it was, and to say to the people of St. Peter's they didn't deserve a road, how can you come and ask the St. Peter's people to have confidence in you? But that road now is being constructed, another major investment. And then you go to Keyon, major investment in the water. And so when I hear people say, nothing happening there, you mean nothing happening there? A stadium, major roads, drilling of water, none of that happened out of the previous administration. And less than 2 years, you have all of that. This is a progressive government, a progressive administration. And therefore, I want to say today, ask our people to look at it. However, I will not negate the fact that our people can have some challenges because of inflation. A lot of the inflation that we bring in, the price of a cornflakes in the US gone up. So when we buy a cornflakes here, the price goes up as well. But in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have increased the minimum wage, something that had not happened for the last decade. We have one of the highest minimum wage now in the whole Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis. We subsidize gas at the pump above a certain price line. We subsidize a tank of gas so that it's cost $30. We take a lot of concession off of food. We have done all of these things in measures to control inflation. But of course, we see some inflation still because there is global inflation. And so when I hear people speak about inflation, speak truthfully and tell the people of St. Kitts and Nevis that this is a global phenomenon. There is no country in the world that is escaping inflation. But we have taken stiff measures to help our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis. This is a responsive government. And finally, to say that we are pushing ahead with the pension for our GAE workers, hundreds, if not thousands of them, who were denied their pension under the previous administration. And our student financial investment savings program is on the way, being headed by the CAPSEC, so that each student would have access to $1,000, be it in savings and part of it be it in investments, so that they can start building their financial portfolio. These are innovative ideas so that we can break the scourge of poverty as far and as much as possible. So I would like to wrap up by finally saying that Labor Day is approaching, and I want to invite all our workers here in St. Kitts and Nevis to the Labor weekend celebrations. It's a weekend for workers. Let us not take our gains for granted. The fact that we have vacation, the fact that we have sick leave, maternity leave, 40-hour work week, and so forth. Those things were achieved because of a labor movement. We have a lot to celebrate, as St. Kitts and Nevis was judged #1 in the CARICOM when it comes to Human Development Index. That is no easy feat. It is because your government is working on your behalf. Thank you very much.